Hi everyone, I'm Noel from CreationEffects.com, and this is the tutorial for using lions for Adobe After Effects. This is the second animal released as part of the Beast series, with more to come soon. Already available are horses and elephants, and my goal with these animals is to give people a quick and easy way to make these lifelike animal animations in which they can control the animal's behavior, even without being an experienced animator. I refer to these as 2D puppets, and they're made from 2D images, so they're limited to a profile or a side view, but they're great as motion design elements or for adding to your 3D scenes. I would also recommend that you check out the Critter Collection series at CreationEffects.com. You can make custom flocks of birds in 3D and schools of fish and swarms of insects, and you can customize all of them so that you can create something for any kind of scene. So let's talk about lions. This is an After Effects template, and it includes both a male lion and a lioness. It comes with a bunch of preset movements to choose from, or you can manually move them using the controls. So I'm going to start by showing you how to use the effect in the simplest scene possible, just to give you an idea of how it works. And then I'm going to explain the effect and kind of summarize how it's made. And then I'll explain some basic rules for duplicating lions or copying lions into a new comp. And then I'll go into adding primary actions to the lions and transitioning from action to action. And then I'll go over all the secondary actions. And lastly, I'll have some helpful tips on using the lions. Alright, first let's go over how to open this zip file correctly. In Windows, you want to right click it and look for an option that says Extract All. If you're on a Mac, you can just double click it. And then you can just open this file in After Effects 2019 or later. Another option, if you're already working in a project and you want to import the lions into that project, you can just go to File and Import and File, and you can just select that lions.aep file and it'll import in this little folder here in your project panel. Just be sure that your project is using the JavaScript render engine, or you could get a ton of errors. You can check that by going to File and Project Settings and Expressions and set this to JavaScript. Alright, when you open the template, you'll see some instructions here, and I'm going to go over these in just a minute. But first, I want to just give you an idea of how this works. So I'm going to open up our male lion, and let's just create a really basic scene. I've got some background images here that I'll drop in, and let's just make this lion walk across. So I'll select the lion layer, and I'm going to go to my Effect Controls panel. If you don't see this panel, you can go to Window and Effect Controls. And we've got some primary actions here at the top, and I'm going to open up the first action, and I'll choose Walk. And I'll set him to walk for about 10 seconds. And if I play it back, you can see what that looks like. So all we need to do now is animate this layer to move across the frame. But first I want to scale him down and position him to where I want him to be. So I'll have him start there. I'm going to hit the P key to reveal the position property, and I'll add a keyframe at frame 0. And I'll go forward about 4 seconds or so, and I'll move him to the other side. I'm not exactly sure what the right speed is, and it's just kind of a guessing game. So we can play it back. And you can see I was way off because the feet are sliding. So he's going way too fast. So I can either edit that second keyframe, or I can just spread out the keyframes and try again. And you can see that was a pretty good guess. The feet are sticking to the ground, more or less. I could probably perfect it a little bit more if I needed to. And again, this is a really basic example. If you had more actions, for example, if you had him go from a walk and then your second action was a trot, you're going to need some more keyframes down here to change the speed of this layer. But that gives you an idea of what you need to do. And when they're transitioning from one action to another, you might notice that some paws are sliding, and that might be hard to avoid during those transitions. But one thing you'll see later on is that we can adjust the paw positions. So you can keyframe individual paws and where they are. And so you could use those during those transition moments to try and make those feet stick if that's bothering you. Otherwise, I don't think most people would ever notice it. And again, there's lots of different things you can do to improve this scene. You can see I've got this grass layer. I cut this out in Photoshop before I did this tutorial. So I could move that in front of his paws just to give it a sense of a little bit more depth. And you can bring in all kinds of other elements and create a whole 3D scene if you wanted with a camera. But that's a different tutorial. I'm not going to get into that here. Let me close that, and I'll go back here and open our lioness. I'll select the lioness and I'll go to my effect controls. And we saw this earlier. We've got our primary action controls, and then we have these secondary action controls. So in here we can choose all the primary actions like stand, walk, trot, canter, stand up, etc. And then down here you can control different body parts like the mouth and the lips and the ears. I'm going to reveal all the effects on this layer. You can see we've got a bunch of effects. These are all puppet pin effects. And there's only one of them that's actually turned on. So this effect is what controls all of the movements of the lion. Just in case you're not familiar, let me show you really quick what the puppet pin tool does. I'm going to start a new composition. I'll just drag in this image of the lion. It's incomplete, but that's okay. This is our puppet pin tool right here. So I can click on that. And if I click on the lion, you can see it creates this mesh. I'm going to add a few more pins just to anchor these parts so that they don't move. And if I move one of those pins, you can see how that warps the mesh. If I open up the mesh down here in this puppet effect, and then open to form, you can see all the different pins that we've added. And if you open up those, you can see there's a position property, and we could keyframe that position if we wanted to. If I change this to advanced, you can see it opens up a couple more properties like scale and rotation. I just wanted to make you aware of these because they could come in useful if you wanted to do some major customization to the animations. And back in our lioness layer, I mentioned that this puppet effect is our main effect, but you can see there's no keyframes here. These other effects have keyframes, but this one just uses expressions, and it's actually getting all the information, the position information from these effects down here. So let's open up one of these. I'll hide this puppet effect and reveal this one. And this is the walk action. Let me zoom in. And so you can see if I scroll down, we got tons of different keyframes. They only go to a little over a second, and then they're set to loop continuously. Also, you can see we've got a lot of different meshes here. If I close them up, well, there's three. There's the front leg, there's the hind leg, and then the main body. So if you wanted to make some adjustments to an action, you could do that by editing the keyframes in these actions down here in these puppet effects. Or you could also adjust pins in the main effect. I just wanted to kind of show you how this is made. So the keyframed movements are all done in these effects, and then this main puppet effect grabs all of that information, the position of these pins. It gets it from all of these, depending on which action is chosen up here. So you saw how there were three different meshes, and if I open up this layer, you can see this layer as a pre-comp. If you double click it, you can open it up, and you can see the different body parts, and they're all separate from each other because these parts need to be animated independently. And the male lion actually has several more parts than this. But you can see the different layers here. There's like a jaw, and there's an ear, and the main body. And then you've got these two layers up here, target comp name and target layer name. Let me unhide those. So they're just text layers, and they say lioness and lioness. These are really important because they tell all of these layers, which have expressions on them. This lets those expressions know which lioness to take direction from. So back in our lioness, we got all these controls Like let's open the mouth. And then if we go back to our pre-comp, you can see that that action is being done inside this pre-comp. But let's go back here and let's change this to, we'll just call the layer lion. And you can see the mouth closed because it's still looking for that layer lioness, which is no longer there. So anytime that you change the name of a layer or the name of a comp, you'll need to come in here and update these layers. And you can just do that by selecting the text tool. This is the comp name and this is the layer name. I'll just change that to lion and you can see it's updated. And that's going to be something you'll need to remember, because anytime you duplicate layers to make multiple lions, or if you copy this layer and put it into a new comp, or if you just rename a layer, the layer name or the comp name is going to be different, or both. And you just got to remember to come in here and update the names on these layers. Let me explain a little more about duplicating lions to create, a pride of lions. If you were to duplicate this layer, you'd see we have lion 2 now. And if we go back to our pre-comp, we could change this to lion 2, but you can see we've got 2 lions. And we're going to want to animate these independently. So that brings us to the next point I want to make. Each lion has to have its own pre-comp. The pre-comps can be found in here, pre-comps and images. And there's a pre-comp for the male lion and the lioness. This is it right here. So anytime that you duplicate a lion, you also need to duplicate the pre-comp. And then you need to connect that new pre-comp to the new lion layer. So the way that you do that is you select the pre-comp in the project panel and you also select the layer. And then with them both selected, you hold down the Alt or the Option key and then click and drag the pre-comp from the project panel onto the layer. So now we've got 2 different pre-comps and they're connected to 2 different lion layers. We still need to update the target comp name and target layer name in here. So lioness, that's the correct comp name. And then in here, I think it's lion 2, right? And then just be sure to turn those layers off so you don't see them on your lion. All right, I'm going to close all of these. And back in our getting started comp with the instructions, I just spoke about rule 1, copying lions to another comp, and rule 2, duplicating lions. And next we have rule 3. This one's really pretty straightforward. It's just talking about the order of the effects on our lion layer. So it's just saying that the order is important and you can't change the order. So don't move this anywhere. Don't add any new effects and put them up here. All new effects, like color correction effects, need to be below this last line here. All right, let's talk about customization now. I'm going to open up the lioness comp, and in our effect controls panel, let's look at these primary action controls. First of all, we've got this flip checkbox. That just controls which direction the lion is facing. And next, first action, we looked at this earlier. Let's keep her at a walk, and let's have her walk for 2 seconds. And let's add another action. So under second action, we'll have her go from a walk to a trot. And let's play it back so you can see. So you might have noticed it doesn't look very natural, and that's okay. It's probably not going to look perfect on the first try. But that's why we've got these different controls, is so we can play with it and try to find the most natural transition between actions. So let's go over these. In our second action, you can see we've also got this duration control. So that's just how long the lion will trot before she moves on to the third action. Then we've got this first to second transition duration, and it's set to 0.3 seconds. So what that means is after it's done walking at the 2 second mark, all of the pins, and let me select the effect so you can see these pins, they're all going to start moving at the 2 second mark. They're going to move to their position for the trot action, and they're going to move over a duration of 0.3 seconds. So if the lion was moving really fast, like you had a run action up here, then you'd probably want this transition to be quicker, like 0.1 seconds. But you can just play with it and see what looks best. But as you saw, some positions aren't ever going to smoothly transition to other positions. And that's why we've got this time shift here. So right now it's set to 0, which means the lion is transitioning to the very first frame of the trot action. And if we actually unhide the trot action down here and go to the first frame, so this is the position it's transitioning to. And if we change this value, like 0.1, this is in seconds, so I can figure out that 0.1 seconds is actually 3 frames, just because my comp is 30 frames per second. So I've gone forward 3 frames, and now this is the position it's going to transition to. And not only can we change that position that it's transitioning to, but we can change the position it's transitioning from. Because remember, we've got this action duration. So if I did 1.8, now we've changed that from position, and we've changed that to position. And usually all you have to do is play with these values and change them by a factor of about 0.1 usually. So you can try 0.1 and then 0.2 and 0.3 and see what works. And usually I don't have to play with it very much before I find something. I think it's a little bit closer there. Let's try that. So I'm pretty happy with that. That just took 3 different tries, entering different values in here. And if you might notice that some feet slide when they're not supposed to, because sometimes you'll have a limb that's going this way and you're transitioning to an action where the limb is moving this way, and you can try and get the best transition using these values, but sometimes you might still have one limb that's not moving quite right. And if you wanted to, you could go into here and adjust the paw position to try and fix that. But that shows you how to transition from action to action. Hopefully that makes sense. And you can string up to 5 actions together. If you needed more than that, you can create another layer and edit the layers together. All right, moving on. I'm going to close the primary actions, and let's talk about these secondary action controls. These are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm just going to breeze through them. Let's open up head position first. So for this one, you need to select the secondary action controls up here. And when you do that, this little crosshair will appear. And then you can click and drag that crosshair to position the head. The other way to do it would just be to click and drag on these values here. So this is just shifting the position. So whatever you enter into here, it's adding to the position of the actions that you've chosen. So you can do this and tilt his head up. And now he's still going to do whatever action you've set in your primary actions. He'll just be looking up when he does it. To reset any position control, you click on the value and enter 0. So these are always going to have some crazy number in here in the thousands. But if you ever want to reset it to the default position, just click on them and hit 0. And that applies for the other position controls as well. Let's look at tail real quick. You can go up or down, and you can curl it a little bit. And then you've got this manual position where you can adjust the crosshair while this is selected. Paw position, same thing. You've got position controls for all 4 paws. And these are going to work best when the lion is standing. You can still move it around while he's running or something, but you might get some weird warping. Moving on, breathing, you can choose the intensity and the heart rate. And then we got a bunch of controls here for like the mouth and the lips, the ears if you wanted to give it like a little ear twitch. Let me show you an example of that. Let me add a keyframe, and then I'm going to reveal the keyframes on this layer by hitting the U key. And it's going to reveal all of these keyframes down here, but we just want to look at the top. So here's our ear control, and let me zoom in. I'm just going to go forward about 4 frames and move his ear forward a little bit, and I'll go forward another 4 or 5 frames and move his ear in the other direction. Go forward another 4 or 5 frames and then go back to 0. So then we got a nice little ear twitch, and I would recommend that you actually select all those keyframes, right click them, go to Keyframe Assistant, and then choose Easy Ease, and it just makes the that movement a little bit more natural. That's a good trick to remember whenever you're adding keyframes to these controls. So then you can close the eyes and make the nose sniff, and then body mass, you can make him fatter or thinner. Shift weight, like if he's on a hill or I don't know, and lower front, make him ready to pounce. High angle perspective, this one raises the feet, the far feet, and gives it the appearance that you're kind of looking down on her. So depending on where she is in your scene, you might want to add some of that. Okay, that does it for the secondary action controls. Let me just go over a few tips, stuff that I learned while using the template to make the demo video, and hopefully it can help you out as well. And first of all, if you're making like a pride of lions, or if you have more than one lion, I would recommend that you add a little bit of variation to each lion, just so they don't all look the same. So if they're walking, maybe on one of them you can raise the head. Let's move him over here. And you could even lower their body mass a little bit. Have one with a tail that's up, one that's down. Maybe one of them has their mouth open a little bit. But that's just something to keep in mind. You don't want them to all look like a bunch of robots. And then also offset the timing of their actions so that they're not all walking in sync with each other. And I think since this first one, the first action doesn't have an offset control, you can just slide the layer over a few frames and that'll do the trick. And another thing you can do to add variation, or I think this might come in handy for a lot of applications, but you can change the speed of any action. There's a couple ways to do it actually. You could pre-compose this layer, go to Layer, Pre-compose, and then you could add any of these time effects to it. So you could do like a time stretch or time remapping and speed it up or slow it down that way. Or another way, this is usually what I do. You can select a layer and reveal all the keyframes by hitting the U key. And you would have to scroll down to your action. So if I'm in the walk action right now, you can just box select them all. And there's going to be quite a few of them. And you can tell when you've reached the end of those walk keyframes because the next action's keyframes are not going to be as the same duration. And once they're all selected, you can hold down the Alt or Option key and click and drag on any of these last keyframes, and that'll let you stretch them out or squeeze them, and then you can make them walk faster or slower that way. Now, if you're animating some kind of complex movement and maybe these controls aren't giving you quite the flexibility that you need, you can always go and adjust the individual pins on this lion. If it's a part of the action that you want to adjust, you can change the keyframes down here. Otherwise, in most cases, you can just do it in this main puppet effect. You can open that up, and you can open any of these meshes and open Deform. And you can see I've labeled all of them, so I can select this foot, the rear foot, and I can rotate it or position it where I want. And actually, you don't want to click and drag it. That'll screw it up. So what you got to do is, I'll undo that, click and drag on the value down here. So you can see how that adjusts the shape. And if you wanted to, you can keyframe this position and everything will still work as normal. You also might want to make changes to the actual images. Let me open up the pre-comp. So you could adjust these images. The only thing to remember is that whatever changes you make, it has to be within the shape of these layers. And what I mean by that is you can't open these images in Photoshop and add something like a helmet on him, because that would come way up here, and anything you do has to be inside this area. You might want to go to a a specific moment in an action and pause it. For example, in this shot, you can see the lion walks in the frame and then he does this sort of sit/crouch position. And there is no sit action here. So what I did is I actually used a lie down action and I kind of paused him right around here. And the way that I did that, I mean, you could do that with time remapping, but then you won't be able to use all of these controls to animate the mouth and the eyes and stuff because you've paused the lion. So what I did is I opened up all the keyframes and I went to that lie down action, close all of these. Here it is. And then I went to this position and I added new keyframes for all of these properties by clicking here. And then I selected all the keyframes after that and deleted them. And so now he's just going to pause. You'd have to do it for all of these, but he would pause that position. And you can always, ease into these last keyframes using the graph editor if you need to. All right, I think that's everything I wanted to show you. I hope you like the effect. Be sure to check out the other stuff at creationeffects.com. There's a whole bunch of creative templates and customizable effects there for After Effects users.